Delivering food at night is usually peaceful. The roads are clear, there's no rush, and you just hop from one house to another, dropping off burgers and pizzas while listening to music or podcasts. I've always liked it. It's kind of meditative, actually. Just me, the dark streets, and my thoughts. But that night felt different, and not in a good way. It was late, maybe around 11 p.m., and I'd been driving for a few hours. I only had one more order to deliver before I called it a night. It wasn't a long run, just another drop-off at some out-of-the-way spot on the edge of town. You know how it is, long roads with no one around, houses way spread out, and no streetlights anywhere. It was a pizza and a soda. Easy. I grabbed the food from the restaurant, threw it in the passenger seat, and punched the address into my GPS. It was about 15 minutes away. I figured I'd drop it off, maybe get a nice tip, and then head home. I started driving, the streets quickly getting quieter as I left the busier parts of town behind. It was one of those clear nights, the sky pitch black except for a few stars. All I could hear was my engine humming and the trees rustling when the wind kicked up. The further I drove, the emptier the roads became, with houses becoming more spaced out until they pretty much disappeared entirely. Normally, this wouldn't bother me. I liked the isolation at night, but something about this particular drive felt off. I was maybe 5 minutes into the drive when I noticed a car behind me. It wasn't tailgating or anything. It was keeping a fair distance, but I could see the headlights in my rearview mirror, and for some reason, that bugged me. I looked at the road ahead, empty, and then back at the car. It was strange seeing another vehicle out here this late. I tried to shake it off. Plenty of people drive late at night. Maybe they were headed in the same direction. Shouldn't be a problem, right? I kept driving, the car still behind me, always at the same distance. It wasn't close enough to feel like it was tailing me, but it wasn't far enough to feel like a coincidence either. I figured maybe they'd pass me eventually. But they didn't. They just stayed there, like a shadow, always a few car lengths behind. I looked at the GPS, 10 minutes to go. I could handle 10 more minutes of this. As the minutes ticked by, I started to feel the tension creeping in. That car was still behind me, keeping pace no matter how fast or slow I went. I tried to rationalize it again. Maybe they lived out here too. Maybe they were just headed home, just like me. But something about it wasn't sitting right. I made a turn onto a smaller road, about the kind with only one lane in each direction and barely any shoulder to pull over on. The road twisted and turned, dipping into small valleys and rising back up again, with thick woods on either side. The kind of road where it feels like you're the only person for miles. Except I wasn't alone. The headlights were still there, still following, as steady as ever. I got that gut feeling, the one that screams something's off, even if you can't figure out why. I checked the GPS again. 5 minutes left, just 5 more minutes. I took another turn, this time onto a road that was barely lit. The trees on either side closing in like a tunnel. The car behind me took the turn too. Now I couldn't shake it anymore. There was no way they were just casually going in the same direction. I wasn't even sure this road led to anywhere else. I sped up, trying to put some distance between us, but the car sped up too. That was it. No more rationalizing. I was being followed. My heart was racing. What the hell did they want? Were they trying to rob me? Was it some psycho messing with me? I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just keep driving and hope they'd lose interest. I wasn't going to lead them to the customer's house either. No way. So I made a split-second decision. Up ahead, I saw a small dirt road branching off the main one. I didn't know where it led, but it didn't matter. I turned the wheel hard, veering onto the dirt road without thinking. The tires skidded on the gravel, kicking up dust as I sped down the narrow path, the headlights behind me disappearing for a second as I rounded the bend. I checked the rearview mirror. Nothing. For a brief moment, I thought I'd lost them, but then just as quickly as they'd vanished, the headlights appeared again, bouncing over the uneven terrain as the car turned onto the same dirt road. I let out a low curse. This wasn't going to be easy. The dirt road twisted and turned, narrowing even more as I drove deeper into the woods. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stop. The other car was getting closer, the headlights growing brighter in the rearview mirror. They were catching up. I tried to stay calm, keep my focus on the road ahead. but the fear was clawing its way up, making it harder to think straight. I could hear the tires crunching over the gravel, the branches scraping against the side of my car as I sped past. The road ahead split into two paths. I had no idea where either of them went, but I didn't have time to think. I took the left path, hoping it would lead somewhere, anywhere, that would get me out of this mess. The car behind me took the right path. For a second, I didn't understand what had just happened. Why hadn't they followed me? Why had they taken the other path? But then, it hit me. They didn't need to follow me. They knew these roads better than I did. They were cutting me off. The moment I realized what was happening, my heart was beating out of my chest. They were going to loop around and block me off. I slammed on the gas, pushing my car to its limit as I tore down the winding dirt road, the trees blurring past me. I had to get out of here. I had to find a way back to the main road before they could cut me off. But the road was getting rougher, the ruts and rocks making it harder to keep control. I could feel the car struggling, the wheels skidding on the loose dirt. Up ahead, I saw the trees thinning out, the road starting to straighten. I was almost there, almost back to safety. And then, just as I thought I was in the clear, I saw it. The car was there, parked sideways across the road, blocking my path. The headlights were off, but I could see the dark outline of the vehicle, waiting for me. They had gotten there first. I hit the brakes, the tires screeching as the car skidded to a stop just a few feet away from the other car. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing for a way out. There was no turning around. The road was too narrow and they'd catch up with me before I could get far. I looked at the car blocking the road, but I couldn't see who was inside. The windows were tinted and the headlights were still off. It was just sitting there, silent, waiting. And then the driver's side door opened. I threw the car into reverse and hit the gas, backing up as fast as I could without losing control. The car in front of me didn't move, but I could feel the tension, like something was about to snap. I didn't care where I was going anymore. I just needed to get away. The dirt road was bumpy, my car jolting with every turn, but I kept going, not daring to look back. I could hear the engine of the other car revving behind me, but I didn't stop. Finally, after what felt like forever, I saw the main road ahead. The trees opened up, the dirt road giving way to asphalt. I sped onto the road without looking, my tires screeching as I merged back onto the highway. I didn't stop until I was miles away, the darkness of the woods far behind me. I never found out who was in that car or why they were following me. Maybe they were just messing with me, trying to scare me. Or maybe it was something worse. All I know is that I didn't want to find out. I kept driving, not stopping until I was back in town, the lights of the city making me feel a little safer. But even now, whenever I drive down those dark, empty roads at night, I keep checking the rearview mirror, waiting for those damn headlights to appear again. Because out there in the dark, you never know who's following you, or why. I've been at this food delivery thing for some time, and for the most part, it's uneventful. It's the kind of gig where you get into a rhythm and the hours pass by without much happening. But this one time, man, this one delivery still messes with me. The night had been slow, and I was thinking about calling it quits when a new order popped up. The delivery was out in the sticks, though. One of those places you don't even realize is part of town because it's so far from everything else. Usually I'd skip an order like that at the end of a shift, but the payout was good, and I figured it'd be quick. That was my first mistake. I picked up the order from a fast food joint I'd been to more times than I could count. The usual routine, grab the bag, and pull up the GPS. The address wasn't ringing any bells, but I figured it was just another drop-off in some random corner of town. The first part of the drive was pretty standard, main roads, street lights, a few cars here and there. But the further I went, the more things started to shift. It felt like I'd left the city behind completely. Before long, I was driving down this narrow road that felt more like a tunnel, trees on both sides crowding the road. My headlights were the only thing breaking through the darkness, lighting up nothing but woods as far as I could see. No houses, no traffic. I tried to shrug off that creeping feeling that I was heading into the middle of nowhere. The GPS said I was getting close, so I figured it couldn't be that bad. After about 15 minutes of winding roads, I finally pulled up to the house. It sat alone at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by trees. The house itself was small, 2 stories but narrow, with peeling paint and one yellow porch light that barely lit up the front steps. There were no cars in the driveway, no lights on inside, and the whole place had this neglected feel to it, like no one had been there in a while. I parked, left the engine running, and grabbed the food. As I walked up to the house, it was dead silent, except for the sound of gravel crunching under my feet. There wasn't even a breeze to break the silence. I stepped onto the porch and knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. I double-checked the address on my phone, then knocked a 3rd time, waiting for any kind of response. That's when I noticed something strange. The door wasn't completely closed. It was just barely cracked open, like someone had left it that way on purpose. But it wasn't wide enough for me to see inside, just enough to make me feel uneasy. I stood there for a minute, debating what to do. Should I just leave the food on the porch? I didn't want to hang around too long, but there was something about that cracked door that made me hesitate. It felt wrong, like I was being watched, even though I hadn't seen or heard anyone. I knocked again, just to be sure, but still no answer. I called out, "Your food's here," but my voice sounded too loud in the stillness. No movement, no shuffling inside, just silence. I crouched down and set the bag on the mat, then turned to leave. But something made me look back at the house one last time. That's when I saw it. The door had opened a little wider, just enough for me to see inside. There wasn't much to see, just a dim hallway with old faded wallpaper. But the thing that caught my eye was a coat hanging from a hook on the wall. It was too clean, too neatly placed in this rundown house. My instincts kicked in, telling me to step back, to leave. But as I did, I thought I saw something move in the shadows of the hallway, just out of my sight. I couldn't move, staring at the spot where I swore I saw something, probably just my imagination. I tried to brush it off. This house was getting to me, making me feel all jumpy, but that feeling that something was off stuck with me. I quickly made my way back to the car, but as I opened the door, I heard a soft creak behind me. I turned, and the door to the house was now fully open, wide open. The food was still sitting on the mat, untouched, but the house, it was inviting me in. The hallway, dimly lit by the yellow porch light, looked even more unsettling with the door open. I wasn't about to go inside. That was out of the question. I'd seen too many horror movies to know better than that. But I couldn't just leave either. I needed to know, was there someone in there? Was someone playing games with me? I took a few steps closer to the porch, my eyes scanning the hallway for any sign of life. That coat was still hanging on the wall, looking like it belonged in another house altogether. And then I heard it. A low creak coming from deeper inside the house, like someone was walking on old wooden floors. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound. I wasn't sticking around to find out what was inside that house. Whatever it was, I didn't want any part of it. I turned and headed straight for the car, not caring how loud my footsteps were now. As I reached for the car door, I heard something. Footsteps. Not mine. They were coming from the porch, steady, like someone was walking out onto the steps. There was no chance I was looking back. I jumped into the car, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I threw the car into reverse, backing out of the driveway as fast as I could. As I pulled onto the main road, I looked in the rearview mirror. The house was barely visible through the trees, but what I saw made my heart sink. The front door was still open, but there was someone standing in the doorway now, just standing there watching me leave. I drove as fast as I could without looking back. The narrow roads felt longer on the way out, like they were stretching just to keep me there. The dark was so thick, the headlights barely made a difference, and every shadow on the side of the road felt like it was creeping closer. It seemed like it took forever, but I finally made it to the highway. The moment I merged onto the road, I felt a wave of relief, like I had left whatever was back at that house far behind. It wasn't until I parked at a gas station to catch my breath that I realized my phone had been buzzing the entire time. I pulled it out and saw a notification from the delivery app. Order canceled. I sat there staring at the notification. Canceled? After I'd gone all the way out there, I checked the delivery details. But there was nothing. No address, no customer name, no order history. It was like the whole thing had disappeared. I thought about going back, trying to figure out what had really happened. But the more I thought about that house, the open door, the footsteps, and the figure in the doorway, the more I knew I couldn't. I drove home that night with my mind buzzing, trying to make sense of it. But no matter how much I thought about it, nothing added up. Who had ordered the food? Why was the door open like that, and who or what was standing in that doorway watching me? I never found out. I never went back. And to this day, I still feel like whatever was in that house was just waiting for me to step inside. Whatever it was, I'm just glad I didn't. Food delivery has always been pretty simple for me. Grab the food, drop it off, give a quick smile, maybe get a tip, and then head to the next spot. It's usually the same thing every time. Nothing too complicated. But there is this one order that still doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it's not like the person was particularly rude or aggressive or anything like that. If anything, it was how little happened that messed with my head. It's like the more I think about it, the less sense it makes. Maybe you'll see what I mean. It was around 9 p.m. when the order came in. It looked like a simple delivery, a burger and fries combo from a local diner to an apartment complex across town. Nothing special, just your typical order from someone probably too tired to cook. I headed over to the diner, picked up the order, and hit the road. It was one of those chilly autumn nights where the air feels heavy and the streets are damp from a light drizzle that had stopped an hour ago. The city was winding down, lights flickering on in windows, but the streets were still busy enough to keep things from feeling eerie. I typed the address into the GPS and headed towards the apartment complex. It was on the far side of town, in a slightly older part, but still nothing that would give you a reason to hesitate. I'd delivered there before. A row of 3-story brick buildings, all identical, with small balconies and windows that looked straight into each other's living rooms. You know the type. The complex didn't have any real parking, just a long alleyway behind it where people usually left their cars. Not the most secure place, but good enough for a quick drop-off. As I pulled into the alley, I noticed it was darker than usual. Only one of the lights along the building was working, casting this weak orange glow that barely lit up the ground beneath it. The rest of the alley was just shadows. I parked as close as I could to the entrance and checked the delivery instructions. Unit 304, no contact, leave at door. I didn't think much of it. No contact orders had become the norm over the past couple of years. People didn't want to interact, which honestly made my job easier most of the time. I grabbed the food, hopped out of the car, and made my way to the building's entrance. The door was old, with one of those buzzers where you had to scroll through a list of names to find the apartment number. I found 304 and hit the button. Nothing. I waited a bit, then hit it again. Still nothing. It wasn't uncommon for these older buildings to have busted intercoms, so I figured I'd just leave the food at the door and be done with it. The door itself was already cracked open, probably a resident not closing it all the way after taking out the trash or something, so I pushed it open and stepped inside. The inside of the building was dim. One lonely bulb hung from the ceiling, casting shadows that stretched across the cracked paint on the walls. The air smelled faintly of mildew and something else, something stale. The kind of smell that sticks to old furniture and lingers in places that don't get a lot of fresh air. I made my way up the stairs, which creaked with every step. I'm used to old buildings making noises, but something about the way these stairs groaned under my weight made me move a little faster. I finally reached the 3rd floor, and as I stepped out into the hallway, I noticed how quiet everything was. Usually in these kinds of buildings, you can hear TVs blaring, people talking, or music coming through the walls. But here, there was nothing, just the dull hum of a fluorescent light above me. Unit 304 was at the far end of the hall, the door standing out because it was slightly ajar. Not enough for me to see inside, but just a crack, like someone had forgotten to close it all the way after stepping out. I paused. That's not normal, right? Most people lock their doors, especially in a complex like this. But again, I thought maybe someone had run out quickly, expecting to come back in a minute. I wasn't about to hang around, though. I walked up to the door, set the food down, snapped a picture for proof of delivery, and turned to leave. That's when I heard a soft creak, like someone shifting their weight just inside the apartment. I froze, expecting the door to swing open and the customer to pop out saying, "Oh, hey, thanks for the food." But that didn't happen. The door stayed ajar, unmoving. I took a step back, looking around the empty hallway, feeling suddenly exposed. No one was around, no footsteps, no sounds of life from the other apartments, just silence. I cleared my throat, more out of nerves than anything. Your food's here," I called, my voice echoing down the hallway. Nothing. I wasn't about to wait around for a thank you. I turned on my heel and made my way back down the hall, quickening my pace as I approached the stairs. But as I reached the top step, I heard it again. That creak. I looked back, my heart thumping in my chest. The door to 304 was now wide open, swinging gently as if someone had just stepped out. But the hallway was empty. No one there. Okay, that's creepy, I muttered to myself, taking the steps 2 at a time as I hurried back down to the first floor. I burst out the door into the alley, the cool night air hitting my face like a splash of water. I didn't waste any time getting to my car. I tossed myself inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. The headlights flicked on, illuminating the alley in front of me. That's when I saw it. The door to the building had swung open again, just like 304, but there was no one standing there. No shadow, no movement, just the door, slowly creaking open. I peeled out of the alley, my tires squealing as I hit the main road. I didn't even stop to mark the order as delivered until I was a few blocks away, my hands still shaking as I tapped the screen. I pulled over and took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. "You're just tired," I told myself. "It's been a long night." I opened the delivery app to mark the order as completed, but something weird happened. The customer's details didn't load right away. The screen froze for a second, like my phone was lagging, and then it just went back to the main screen. No confirmation. I stared at it for a moment, confused. I had definitely just dropped off the food. Why wasn't it letting me finish the order? I scrolled back through the list of deliveries, trying to find the one I'd just completed, but wasn't there. I went through it again, slower this time, sure that I must have missed it, but no, the order wasn't listed at all. That didn't make sense. I had the food, I had driven to the complex, walked up to the door of apartment 304, and left it there. I was sure of it, so why was there no record of it now? I decided to check the photo I'd taken of the food on the mat, just to confirm. But when I opened my gallery, there was no picture. It was gone. Now I was starting to doubt myself. Had I forgotten to take the photo? No, I had heard the door creak open after I set the food down. I'd seen it. But there was no proof. No picture, no order details, nothing. It was like the whole delivery had never even happened. I sat there for a minute, trying to piece it together. Should I contact support? But what would I say? Hey, I delivered food to an apartment and now it's like the order vanished from the app. They just tell me to reboot my phone or something. I figured I'd drive back, just to double check. Maybe the customer had already grabbed the food. Maybe I missed something. I needed to see it with my own eyes. When I pulled back into the alley behind the complex, everything looked the same, just as dark, just as quiet. I parked and made my way back up the stairs to 304. The mat where I'd left the food was empty, and the door was shut. There was no sign that anyone had been there at all. I stood there for a while, staring at the door, waiting for something, anything to happen. But there was nothing. No creaking floorboards, no shifting shadows, just that heavy silence. I left after that. There wasn't anything more I could do. And honestly, I didn't want to stick around. Whatever had happened in that apartment, it wasn't my problem. But even now, I can't get it out of my head. The way that both doors were slightly open, like it was waiting for me. The fact that the order and the photo just disappeared without a trace. No matter how much I try to rationalize it, there's this nagging feeling that something was in that apartment. I still check my gallery sometimes, just to see if the photo somehow pops back up. It never does. I've been delivering food for a while now. You know how it is. Good money, easy hours, you work when you want. Most of the time it's just in and out. Drop the food off, maybe exchange a quick thanks or a nod, and then you're off to the next one. It's not glamorous, but it's easy. Honestly, it's so routine that you kind of get lulled into this false sense of security. It's just people, right? What's the worst that can happen? That's what I thought. It was a Tuesday night. I'd been driving since the afternoon and had knocked out about 6 deliveries already. I wasn't even tired yet, so when this new order popped up, I figured I'd squeeze in one more. It was a pretty standard delivery, just some Thai food from this place I'd been to a million times. The address was in a gated community about 20 minutes away. I didn't think much of it. These suburban neighborhoods are all the same. Quiet, clean, and nothing out of the ordinary ever really happens there. I pulled up to the gate and punched in the code the customer had left in the app. The gates opened with that slow, almost dramatic creak that you'd expect from a movie. I chuckled to myself, thinking I must be watching too many horror flicks if that's where my mind went right away. The houses inside were all massive. You know, the kind with manicured lawns and driveways that look like they've never seen a crack. They all had those bright porch lights that gave off a warm glow, but for some reason, the neighborhood was eerily still. No dogs barking, no kids playing in the yard, just house after house, perfectly aligned in a row like something out of a picture book. I drove down the street and found the house, number 127. Big, white, with those black shutters that people put on to make their house look fancier. A massive oak tree in the yard, casting long shadows across the driveway. It was the only house on the block without a car parked out front, which I thought was a bit weird, but whatever. Not everyone keeps their car outside. I parked, grabbed the food, and headed up the driveway. The porch light was on, like the rest of them, but the inside of the house was completely dark. Not even a TV flickering through the windows. I hesitated for a second, looking around, wondering why the house seemed so dead. But I shrugged it off. It wasn't my place to worry about. Just drop the food and go, I told myself. I rang the doorbell and stepped back as usual. You give people space these days, especially with deliveries. It's polite. After a few seconds, the door opened and a guy stepped out. He was older, early 50s maybe. He had this hair that looked like it hadn't been washed in a few days, and he was wearing a button-down shirt that seemed a little too tight around his belly. His smile was the first thing I noticed. It was forced. Like his mouth was doing something his brain wasn't fully behind. "Hey," he said, too cheerfully for the time of night. "Thanks for coming out. I know it's late." "No problem," I replied, handing him the bag. "Here's your food." That should have been the end of it. I expected him to take the bag, say thanks, maybe toss me a tip and shut the door. But instead, he just stood there, still holding the bag, still grinning like some over-enthusiastic game show host. "You want to come in for a minute?" he asked suddenly. Come in? I'd never had a customer ask me that before, especially not one I didn't know. No, that's all right," I said quickly. "I've got a few more deliveries to make." His grin didn't falter, but his eyes, they narrowed. Just a little. "Aw, come on. Just for a sec, I've got a tip for you. Better than what I could put on the app." "Thanks, but I really have to go," I insisted, stepping back. He let out this weird little chuckle, like he thought something was funny. Sure. No problem." I didn't stick around to find out what was so amusing. I nodded, turned, and walked back to my car. As I climbed in, I looked back at the house. He was still standing there, right in the doorway, holding the bag of food, staring at me. Like he wasn't just some normal guy standing there, but something else. I pulled out of the driveway and drove down the street, shaking off the weird feeling. I kept picturing him, still grinning like a weirdo. People are strange sometimes. I told myself I was being dramatic, that the guy was just overly friendly and maybe a little socially awkward. Nothing to lose sleep over. But as I reached the gate, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. New message from customer 127. "Hey, you forgot something." I frowned. That was impossible. I double-checked the order before I left, and I didn't leave anything behind. I considered just ignoring the message and marking the delivery complete, but something made me hesitate. Maybe he genuinely thought something was missing. I figured I'd just reply, clarify that everything was in the bag, and then be done with it. I pulled over just outside the gates and tapped out a quick response. Everything should be there. Double-checked the bag before I handed it over. A few seconds later, the reply came, "No, you forgot something." Okay, now this was getting weird. What did he mean by that? I stared at the message for a minute, debating whether to just block the number and move on. But before I could even make up my mind, bam, another message popped up. "You left too soon. You should come back." That's when the unease turned into something worse. This wasn't just some guy asking for ketchup or napkins. Something was wrong. I looked around, suddenly feeling exposed in my car. I clicked the app to mark the delivery complete, figuring that would sever the connection. But then another message came through, this time from a different number. "Come back. I'm waiting." I didn't wait to think about it. I blocked the number, slammed my car into drive, and sped off. I didn't care if I missed another delivery. I just wanted to get away from that house. Away from him, but my phone kept buzzing. First, one message, then another, all from different numbers, all saying the same thing: "Come back, you forgot something." How was he messaging me from all these different numbers? Why was he so insistent on me coming back? Was he just screwing with me, or was there something worse? I kept driving, not stopping until I was back on a main road, surrounded by the glow of streetlights and other cars. The messages had stopped by then, but I didn't feel any relief. If anything, I felt more anxious. I pulled over again, checking my phone. The last message had come through 10 minutes ago. "Don't make me come find you." That's when I called it quits for the night. I drove straight home, not bothering to check for any more orders. I locked the doors, turned off my phone, and tried to calm down, but that little voice in my head just wouldn't shut up. I knew I hadn't left anything behind at the house, but what if he had planned to keep something? What if the moment I stepped inside, that door would have locked behind me? The next morning, I checked my phone again. No new messages, no strange numbers, nothing. I reported the guy to the app, told them about the messages, but they just said they'd flag his account. No big deal. I should have let it go, but I couldn't. Whenever I thought about it, that creepy feeling came back, like I'd narrowly dodged something dangerous. I still wonder what would have happened if I'd gone back. Weeks went by, and I didn't hear from him again. I figured it was over, that he'd found someone else to mess with. But then, one night when I was out on another delivery, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "I didn't forget you." That was all it said. Just a simple sentence, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that some people don't just want food delivered. Some people want you. And sometimes they'll do anything to get you back. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more terrifying tales. Share this video with friends who think food delivery is a piece of cake. They might think twice after this. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload that's sure to keep you on the edge of your seat. Got your own creepy delivery story? Drop it in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.